In this super duper video, I'm going to compare the Garmin Edge 530 with the Garmin Edge 830. Garmin is the original OG in the bike GPS market with many years in which to hone its product range. The 530 and the 830 are two of the most capable bike computers out there, used by both pro cyclists and normal riders alike. But how do they compare to one another? What are the key differences? Which is the best for your needs and your pockets? Well, saddle up partner and let's find out. Hi, I'm Monty and this is Sportive Cyclist, the mammal channel. I make videos about road cycling. If you're into inexpertly reviewed cycle tech, incompetent velo maintenance or very average displays of road bike fitness, hopefully there's something here that will tickle your gooch. Onwards? Too long, didn't watch. Now it's a pain when YouTube videos drag out the punchline, so I'll summarise up front. The Edge 530 and the 830 are both very similar in how they look and how they perform. The feature set is 99% the same. They are both very good bike computers. The key difference is that the Edge 830 has a touchscreen. Now, it's a good touchscreen and for me, materially improves the experience of using the device. It is something that I would pay more for. The other main difference is that the Edge 830 has more ways to search for a location to navigate to, an address or a point of interest. This is not something that I would pay extra for. The difference in price between the two devices is not small, $100 or £90, but speaking personally, having used both devices somewhat extensively, I, for one, would pay the iron price in order to upgrade to the Edge 830. With that out of the way, we return you to your regular programming of long-winded guffery. First, a word about model numbers. Yes, model numbers. It won't have escaped your notice that both the 530 and the 830 end in a 30. The 30 suffix denotes the fact that both of these devices are the fourth in their respective model ranges, despite the fact there is not a 4 anywhere in the picture. So the Garmin Edge 5 series started with the Edge 500, followed by the 510, the 520, let's ignore the 520 Plus, and we're on to the fourth iteration, 530. Now, we'll gloss over the fact that I think that the 30 at the end makes for a particularly unappealing model number. We'll also gloss over the fact that I have a view on whether a model number is aesthetically pleasing. Let's go! So what do the Edge 530 and 830 actually do? Well, they are fully featured GPS bike computers. Their core function is to track your ride data on the bike, where you've been, how far you've ridden. They display this data on the screen whilst you're out on the bike, both devices attached to your handlebars, and they record it for your later highly scientific analysis or mild disinterest in apps like Strava. Both GPSs will help you plan and navigate a route, communicate with an array of on-bike and on-person data sensors, facilitate sophisticated training programs, track your fitness and your recovery status over time, help you stay fully hydrated and fueled over the course of your long rides, let you know if you're not fully acclimatized as you venture out into the higher mountains, and act as a bike alarm when you're at a cafe stop. And that's only scratching the surface. In short, the Edge 530 and 830 have a vast array of software features and capabilities, from the everyday techno bobbins through to the highly sophisticated why would anyone need that whiz-bangery technical term. Whatever their differences, and we'll come to those in a minute, both definitely fall in the fully featured GPS bucket rather than the one labelled bog standard. And because they're both waterproof to the IPX7 standard, you should have no fears from dropping them in said bucket. Physical features. The Edge 530 and 830 are physically very similar. The device cases both share the same dimensions, which is a wordy way of saying they're the same size. Whilst not as ickle as my Wahoo Element Bolt, yes, this is the new V2 version, videos on the way, they're certainly not large. Actually, why don't I just show you them compared to a few other GPS devices? They both look good proportionally when affixed to my trusty velocipede, whether that's on stem or in out front mount. The key obvious physical difference is that the Edge 830 has 3 physical buttons, whereas the Edge 530 is blessed with 7. They both have 2 on the front edge of the device, essentially the start, stop and the lap buttons, and they both have a power button on the side. The Edge 830 does away with the 530's enter, back, up and down buttons because it has a touchscreen. More on that later in the video. Still on the physicalities, both of them have the electrical contacts on the mounty bit at the back, which allows you to connect them to Garmin's Charge secondary power pack. Internals, we just mentioned electricals, let's get a bit more techie. And by a bit more techie, of course, I mean not very techie at all. With this generation of GPS devices, the Edge 830 and 530, Garmin significantly increased the computing power. I don't know if both use exactly the same chips, wires, pipes, valves, but the resulting performance is the same. In my experience, both devices are whizzy quick when zooming in and moving around maps between screens, up and down the menu. They're equally zippy when calculating routes. But whilst materially better, more powerful than older Garmin's, they're not materially different in the silicon grunt stakes when compared to one another. So not a factor to favour or discount either option. Very sorry. Weight. The Edge 830 is 3.3 grams heavier than the Edge 530, which is about the weight of a penny, whether that's a UK or a US one. They're both in the same ballpark. In absolute terms, according to the Garmin website, I can't be bothered to check, the 530 weighs about 76 grams, the 830 79 grams. You may well buy a protective case, my Amazon associate stats tell me people do, and you'll also have it in an out front mount. These all add to the overall weight of the bike GPS package. But as we've discussed many times before, yes, many times, these sorts of weights basically add up to nothing when compared with the additional winter cushioning that many of us carry around our midriff. So again, another long-winded way of saying there's basically no difference in the weight between these two devices. You shouldn't care, and this is not a reason to decide between the two. Battery life. The Edge 530 and 830 have the same stated battery life of up to 20 hours. As is usual in my slapdash reviewing methodology, I haven't tested this systematically. In the real world, the actual life of the device between charges will depend on how you use it, the screen brightness that you set, the choice of satellite network. In use, I can't say I've noticed a great deal of difference in battery performance. Both devices feel like they go a good number of rides between charges, provided I've not set the screen to permanent 100% brightness, then the charge bar doesn't seem to deplete too rapidly. Unless you're some sort of Ironman triathlete, in which case I'm not sure you're welcome around these parts, then the 530 and the 830 will do the job. And there's always the charge secondary power pack if you have an irrational fear of the flat battery. In short, battery life is not a differentiating metric in making your choice between these two devices. So you might ask, why have I spent so long going on about it? Vive la différence! So the Edge 530 and 830 look more or less the same, weigh more or less the same, and do more or less the same thing. What then separates the two devices? What do you get for your extra $100? And most importantly, are those extra bits worth it? It's time to celebrate some differences. Here are those differences in a nutshell. Number one, touchscreen. The Edge 830 has one, the Edge 530 does not. But surely you knew that. Number two, buttons. Number three, the Edge 830 makes it easier to navigate to a street address, a place, or a point of interest. Number four, buttons. That's it. I'm being slightly sarcastical, but this is the truth of the matter. The question to ask ourselves, is it worth paying an extra $100, £90, to have a touchscreen on what is otherwise a very similar device? My answer? Probably. Yes, maybe. Don't talk to me. This guy. But first, let's cover off navigation. Back in the day, navigation used to be one of the key differences between the Edge 5 series and 8 series of bike GPSs. Whilst Edge 8 series computers had the ability to plan and recalculate routes on the device itself, it knew where you were, it knew where other places were. The Edge 5 series of devices did not. All the Edge 500, 510, 520 could do was plot a breadcrumb trail of GPS waypoints on top of a pretty basic map. If I went off course beyond sounding an alarm and wafting a digital finger in the general direction I might like to head, neither my 510 nor my 520 could give me accurate directions back to my route. The picture changed with the introduction of proper mapping on the Edge 520 Plus. Nowadays, the difference between the 530 and the 830 in terms of navigation is minimal to the point of being barely noticeable. The Edge 530 contains detailed maps for the region in which you bought it, and like the 830, it knows where the roads are you could calculate and recalculate a route on the device itself. If you're simply following a route uploaded from your Strava, Ride with GPS or wherever, then there's simply no difference between them. The key remaining difference is when you're creating a route on the device itself, and here I'm talking about point-to-point routes where you want to go to a specific location like a train station or the house of your paramour. On the Edge 530 you can select a specific point to navigate to, but only by moving a set of crosshairs of your chosen location. On the Edge 830 on the other hand, there are a number of ways to search for and then navigate to a specific place. Firstly and most usefully, you can search for a specific location by entering a street address. That said, the programming logic is, how you say, slightly esoteric. In the UK you type in half rather than the full postcode, then you type in the house number, then you select from a number of different street addresses with the same house number but on different streets, which is weird. I've seen this address search approach used precisely never times before. Maybe this makes more sense for US addresses or for Garmin's car GPS users. In addition to street addresses, you can navigate to a village, a town, a city, presumably the middle of it, an intersection or a set of coordinates. Finally, you can select from a list of points of interest that are stored on the device. They're divided into a number of helpful categories: food and drink, attractions, accommodation, transport hubs, brothels, not brothels. And whilst I haven't yet had cause to use this feature in anger, I can see it being useful. Say you're mixing a little bike touring with using the train. You can navigate to your nearest station without knowing the precise street address of that station. There are countless similar use cases. Who knows, in the points of interest list perhaps is the address of our aforementioned illicit lover. Finally, I should probably say that the 830 has another feature that makes the navigation experience materially different from that of the Edge 530, and that is the touchscreen. So let's talk about the touchscreen. The touchscreen. Both devices employ exactly the same size screen. For the screen stat fans, that's a 2.6 inch jobby, which translates to 246 by 322 colour pixel, which is quite a lot less than your phone, and hence one of the reasons why Edge devices can comfortably record your 100-mile bike ride whilst your phone runs out of juice at around the 20-mile mark. As mentioned ad infinitum, the key difference between these two devices is that the 830 employs a touchscreen, whereas the 530 does not. You can navigate around the screens and menus of the 830 using a handy digit in a slightly more regimented fashion than the smartphone styling we're all used to. On the 530 you have to do all of that using the physical buttons, which I suppose to generation iPhone would be considered a negative. I should say that the buttons only approach hardly makes the Edge 530 unusual in the world of bike GPS. It's exactly the same for all the Wahoos, most of the Brightons, the Stages, the Lazine, Lazone, and all of the older members of the Garmin Edge 5 series family. But does the touchscreen make the Edge 830 easier to use than the 530? Answer: yes. I've mentioned in previous videos that the Edge 530 has lots of menus and sub-menus to deal with all the options and things that you can change on the device. The Edge 830 is no different, but menu navigation with the touchscreen is a lot easier. It makes moving around the device, the menus, more intuitive and a lot quicker. With the 530's buttons on the sides, you have to develop the muscle memory to remember what button does what. Many's the time I've intended to confirm something, instead pressed the back button and had to redo the action all over again. On the Edge 830, the relevant icons or buttons appear on the screen. Ticks for yes, crosses for cancel, little arrows for go back. It's much more intuitive and less susceptible to user error, and I'm very skilled in user error. Manipulation of the mapping screen is made infinitely more usable with the touchscreen. You can use the finger pinch and spread out motions in order to zoom in and zoom out on the map. There are also plus and minus icons. If you forget how to pinch and spread, you can move around the map simply by moving your finger on the screen. The Edge 530 mapping implementation, using the buttons on the side and having to switch the function of those buttons between zoom and move around mode, is a lot more clunky. With the Edge 830 you can zip around the map whilst you're riding. Say you're not following a route and you just want to get a general sense of the area. With the 530 this is time consuming and faffy, and probably safest done when you're stopped. In short, the touchscreen touchscreen on the Edge 830 means I play around with the mapping feature much more on this device, whereas frankly on the 530 I don't. I only use it when I'm following a route. Touchscreen quality. So the Edge 830 has a touchscreen and the Edge 530 doesn't, but is it technically a good touchscreen? I'm not in the slightest way qualified to answer that question, but that's never stopped me in the past. The touchscreen certainly seems to do the job. It seems responsive and quick. You quickly stop thinking about it as you get on with using the Edge 830, which is probably a good thing for a user interfacey type thing. When I've used a touchscreen in the rain and my fingers have been wet, it's been slightly slower to respond, maybe, but it definitely works. My only point of caution is when wearing gloves. I haven't had too much time playing around with the 830 when it's beloved, but it seems a little bit hit and miss. It did respond to some button presses and screen swipes, but not all of them. Multiple swipes required. Whilst gloves might be an issue for all touchscreen devices, chances are you'll be using the Edge 830 outside in poor weather conditions more frequently than your phone. I guess the fallback would be to remove my gloves if the Edge 830 isn't responding, but it's a pain though, particularly for someone like me with sensitive handy-wandy. Turning to the non-touchscreen device, using the Edge 530 wearing gloves is still challenging. It's a small device with small buttons, and gloves materially increase the size of your fingers with material. With physical buttons though, at least you know they'll work if you press in the right place. Newness. Or are Garmin going to release a new version? Well, eventually. The Edge 530 and 830 were released on the same day in April 2019, making them identical in the newness or lack of newness stakes. Whilst quite old in Apple years, back in the real world, they're more current in terms of bike GPS devices. Garmin's product schedule isn't quite as predictable as the aforementioned fruit-based tech bauble maker. The Edge 520 was released in mid-2015, with the 520 Plus mini update coming in April 2018. It took 3 years for the Edge 1030 to be upgraded to the Plus version. Clearly I have no hotline to Garmin. If I did, I'd be using it to request review units, but they seem to be working to a cadence. Yes, of releasing new versions of existing bike computers every 3 years or so. I guess you could wait to see what comes next, but if you're solely comparing the 530 and the 830, then neither feels more due an upgrade than the other. Price. I won't spend too much time on absolute prices. They'll differ depending on where you live, and clearly prices can move around. Right now in the UK, the Edge 530 retails for £260 and the 830 for £350. That's both on a device only basis. That equates to $300 and $400 respectively. I'll include relevant buying links in the description below if you would like to take a look, but it's the relative price difference between the 530 and the 830 that is more relevant. Maths wizards will already have calculated the delta, yes, delta, at £90 or $100. So now we get to the crotch of the matter. With that price difference between the 530 and the 830, which one would I buy and which one would I recommend? Which one would I recommend? Which one would I buy? Well, the one I would buy is both of them, but then I'm an aspiring bike tech vlog influencer. In terms of features and computing power, they're very similar. They both continue to receive software update from Garmin, and they both have the internal grunt to handle whatever new whiz-bangery is being uploaded to them. For me, the additional navigation features, being able to search for a specific street address or a point of interest, don't merit paying extra for the 830. On the other hand, and I wasn't expecting to say this before I bought one, the touchscreen on the 830 is absolutely worth paying the extra for over the buttons only 530. You can certainly get by with the Edge 530. It will support all of your complex training, fitness tracking, hydration, monitoring, recovery, perusing needs. But the touchscreen on the Edge 830 makes that whole experience easier and more intuitive. It's still a complex user interface, but being able to move quickly back and forth between screens, in and out of menus, up and down the city road, well, pop goes the weasel. In short, if paying the extra for the Edge 830 isn't going to blow your cycling tech budget for the next decade, I'd recommend going for it. But if you're on a tighter budget, then the Edge 530 is a more than adequate, nay excellent bike GPS. You will not feel shortchanged in the functionality departments. It will catapult you to pro level performance, maybe. And on that fence straddling bombshell, I bring this video to a close. If you found it useful, then please hit the like button. Subscribe if you want more lycra clad frolics. I've been Monty, this is Sportive Cyclist. I'll see you in the next video.